My name is John Doyle. I am beyond being a City Island resident like the rest of you, which is the most important thing, a citizen activist. I'm the Democratic District Leader for the 82nd District, which includes City Island. I'm a board member of the Chippewa Democratic Club, and obviously I'm on the steering committee for City Island Indivisible. I want to thank all the members of our steering committee. I see so many of them here. Barbara Zom. I see Michael Morrison, who took the reins for a period of time. I see Andrea Allen, who's here, Alice Schechter, so many wonderful people here. So I just want to thank everyone for being here, because when we come together, we can do great things. And everything starts with a conversation. In keeping with that, I know we are trying to get everybody mobilized. It's a very, very big year for our for our country and also for our community. We're going through a redistricting, as some people know, but keep in mind, even though while New York's not considered a swing state, so to speak, we also have a number of House seats, particularly in the downstate New York area, a number of House seats that are likely to be competitive, either out on Long Island or on the Hudson Valley. So things we can do, whether it's door knocking, whether it's postcards, whether it's phone banking, these are all things we're going to need to take advantage of. And in keeping with that, everybody who signed up here tonight, we are going to have a City Island Indivisible phone bank next week, early next week, either Monday or Tuesday at Clipper Coffee. And we're going to phone bank for Tom Suozzi, because it's vitally important that Tom Suozzi take that seat back in the House for the Democrats and starts us on a path to obtaining a majority so we can put this clown show to rest that's going on there. In keeping with that, because I know not everybody is here tonight to see me, I want to turn it over to Simon Rosenberg. Simon is nationally known. He's a well-regarded strategist, and you've probably seen him a lot on television lately. He came from the Clinton war room, Bill Clinton's campaign. He was one of the successful people who helped the messaging strategy there, helped Bill Clinton get elected. He served a number of years in the new Democratic Council, made a run for DNC chair, and then recently has come to a claim to fame because he was one of the very few people, when everyone else was doom and gloom, to correctly predict that the red wave was not going to be coming. So if there's someone we need to listen to about the emerging electorate and changes and trends, I can't think of a better person that we need to listen to than Simon. So Simon, without further ado, I want to thank you for being here with all of us. We're very excited, and I'll turn it over to you.
John, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm doing this in part because my mother was born in the Bronx and went to St. Tolentine High School many, many years ago. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for anything to do with the Bronx. And my father grew up in Greenwich Village. My mom grew up in the Bronx. I was born in Lenox Hill Hospital in the city. We lived in Washington Heights, and then we moved to Wilton, Connecticut when I was 7 years old. But all my brothers and sisters still live in the New York area and the city throughout, scattered, cousins in Long Island, all over. So I'm a New Yorker by birth and a DC guy by life. And so it's just great to be with all of you. And John's right. I just want to say one thing is that, you know, you're on the front lines in New York this year. It's not often the case that you've got really competitive elections that really matter for control of anything in Washington, but you do this time. I mean, the people of New York can deliver the House with the Democratic Party. And so the kind of work that you're doing with Tom Suozzi as sort of a warm-up really matters for what's going to come in the general. I mean, you literally could be the folks that make sure that we have a trifecta when we reelect Joe Biden in November. So this is important work, and I'm really proud to be supporting all of you. Let me talk a little bit about what I'm seeing nationally, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. My basic take on the election is that Joe Biden is a good president. The country is better off. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country, except for New York a little bit, and that they have Trump and Trump. And so let's go through that. Let's just take those three things in order. Joe Biden has been a good president. I think that Joe Biden has fulfilled his central promise to all of us that he made when he ran for president in 2020, which is he told us that he was going to get us to the other side of COVID successfully. That was really his fundamental promise, and he has. I mean, if you look at where we are today as a country, our economy has the strongest recovery of any advanced economy in the world. We have the best job market since the 1960s. We have now records being set by all three stock market indices. The deficit is trillions of dollars less than it was when he came to office. We have extraordinary levels of real wage growth and new business formation and prime age worker participation rates. We've seen inflation come way down. Inflation that was a global event is lower here than any other advanced economy in the world. And prices now are not just, the rate of inflation is not just slowing. We're seeing prices come down with rents, mortgages, food, right? Things that matter to people, we're seeing prices come down. Paul Krugman just dropped a column in the New York Times right before I got on here saying, it's not a Goldilocks economy, which is this term that economists use for sort of everything going right at the same time. It's better, is what Paul Krugman just wrote. And yesterday, the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, who's a Republican and was put into place by a Republican, went on and on and on in his remarks about how strong and the economy is today. I will say one other stat is that we have the lowest uninsured rate in American history. And so if you're a young person, and I get a lot of questions about what's happening with young people and their ability to make it in the economy, I just want to remind people, and I've got 3 Gen Z kids who are 23, 21, and 18. They're entering the best job market since the 1960s. More young people have insurance than any time in American history. Biden has forgiven loans, over $130 billion of student loans. Believe it or not, home ownership rates among Gen Z is higher at this stage at their age than it was with Gen X and millennials. The minimum wage has been increased all across the country in recent years because of Democrats. And so the starting salary and the starting wage for young workers is higher than it's been in a long time. So if you're a young person, and then finally the 3 big bills that Biden has passed will create more economic opportunity and more job opportunities over the next generation than we had in the previous 25 years. And so even for young people, where there's been oftentimes when I give these presentations, people ask about the economic opportunities for young people. The economic opportunities for young people today is better than it's probably been in 40, 50, 60 years. Joe Biden has been a good president. He's left the country better off, which was his central promise to all of us. And I think we're going to have a very strong case to make for re-election. The Democratic Party is strong, number 2. We know that we won in 2018 and won in 2020. We took the presidency away, the Senate, the House, 2 terrific victories. But then something really dramatic has happened in the last 2 years, which is that the party in power throughout modern American history always loses ground. We lose seats in the House. We lose, by special elections and midterm elections. And the exact opposite has happened in 2022 and 2023. We've actually gained ground in both elections, which I'm pretty sure has not happened going all the way back to the 1930s under FDR. It's a remarkable performance by the Democratic Party, despite high inflation and low Biden approval during some of that period. And in 2022, I just want to remind everybody that in the battleground states that really matter, we actually gained ground over our 2020 results in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. We got to 59% in Colorado, 57% in Pennsylvania, 55% in Michigan, 54% in New Hampshire. Those are remarkable results in a good year. And those were our results in what was supposed to be a tough year. We know that we didn't do well everywhere, right? In New York and California, we fell back a little bit, and it's one of the reasons that we didn't do as well in the House as we hoped. But the fact that we kept the House so close makes it much more likely that we're going to win it back in 2024. We picked up in 2022 a Senate seat. We picked up 4 state legislative chambers. We picked up 2 governor seats net. Again, remarkable performance, surprised everybody. We're still waiting for the red wave, as John mentioned all this time later. And I'm really proud of everybody who worked so hard to bring about those results. And then the question is, would this basic dynamic that we saw that really began with the Dobbs decision in the spring of 2022, would it carry on to 2023? Because that basic dynamic was Democrats overperforming expectations, Republicans struggling, which we saw all across the country. And then it did continue in 2023. We started off the year by flipping this Wisconsin Supreme Court seat, flipping the ideological control of the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. We're going to be able to end the rancid redistricting there. Huge victory for us in a critical state. We then flipped Colorado Springs and Jacksonville, Florida, two of the largest cities in America, long held by Republicans, traditionally very Republican cities, now in the Democratic column. We then were able to, in Ohio, right, win with 57%. We took away the 6-week abortion ban in Ohio from the Republicans. Virginia, defying all expectations, we kept the Senate, flipped the House. We ended Glenn Youngkin's hope of becoming somehow the backdoor nominee of the party in this election cycle. And we also, more importantly, took away what was their wish, that the 15-week abortion ban would somehow be an escape hatch for them on this issue, this huge error that they've made in stripping women in this country of their rights and freedoms. And so we had another extraordinary election in 2023, where in special elections and mayoral elections and school board elections and governorships all across the country, we actually did better than we did before, defying, again, history. So the question was, would this basic dynamic, Democratic overperformance, Republican struggle, play out in 2024, right? And it has. And what we've seen early is that in Orlando, Florida, just a couple weeks ago, in a heavily contested House race where we were outspent, 2-3 to 1, we flipped a House seat on the morning after Trump and DeSantis finished 1 and 2 in Iowa. Unexpected victory. Our team down there didn't even think we were going to win. But again, when people are voting, we keep overperforming. And what's happened to them? In Iowa, they had an anemic turnout, one that disappointed and frankly worried many Republicans. In Iowa, they spent $100 million just a few weeks ago. Huge spending, competitive race. And only Donald Trump only got 56,000 votes. 56,000 Republicans voted for Donald Trump. 691,000 Republicans did not. If he was this titanic figure who was galvanizing the Republican Party, why did so many people not show up and vote for him in the Iowa caucuses? And then in New Hampshire, just last week, Trump underperformed his poll numbers by 10 to 15 points. Again, another worrisome performance. We've also seen in the polling, the exit polls, the entrance polls that were taken, that there's a big chunk of Republicans in both states that were worried about Trump, that they were worried about his illegality. They could see it as disqualifying. And one of the most remarkable polling results we've ever seen since I've been in this business, which is more than 30 years, more Haley voters in Iowa said they would vote for Biden than they would vote for Trump in the general election. 20% of the people of Iowa, the people who voted in a Republican primary, which is the core Republican audience, right, said they would pick Biden over Trump. We've never seen polling like that. There has never been a large chunk of either party that was so willing to vote for the nominee of the other party this early in the election cycle. So again, we reinforce this basic dynamic that we've seen now since the spring of 2022 of Democrats overperforming, Republicans struggling. And then let's go to number 3, Trump, and the fact that they're rallying behind the most unfit man to ever run for president of all of our history. Donald Trump 2024 is not the same Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. He's far weaker. He's campaigning from the courthouse and not from the White House. He's more degraded, more extreme, more dangerous. His performance on the stump is far more erratic, unhinged, and even, frankly, disturbing when you listen to him talk. And he's also making really profound traditional political errors, the kind of errors that cause candidates to lose elections, like coming out against the ACA at the same time the ACA was announcing record signups and the uninsured rate was lower than it's ever been, or taking credit repeatedly on camera for ending Roe, giving us incredible material to use against him. Donald Trump is much weaker than he was in 2020 and 2016. And I'll remind you about one thing, which is that the voters that are going to vote in this election are going to know a bunch of things about him that they didn't know in 2020 or 2016. And let me go through them, because this is important, because we have to get used to talking to people in our communities about how he's changed. Number one, we know that he raped E. Jean Carroll in a department store dressing room. That was determined by a jury of his peers, not by me and not by Democrats, but in a court of law and by a jury. Second is that we know that in New York, He oversaw a decades-long financial fraud, and the state of New York has asked for $370 million worth of penalties and fines. This decision will come down any day, and it could bankrupt him and his family. Third is that we know that he led a party-wide insurrection, an effort to overturn American democracy for all time, and win the election in 2020 through illicit means. Dozens of Republicans have been indicted for these crimes all across the country, and he was the ringleader and will likely, and has already been indicted, as we all know, 91 times, and is out on bail, by the way. I mean, he was arrested in the fourth thing, which is that he stole America's secrets. He lied to the FBI about it, and he told people about the secrets. We know this. Any other person that had walked out of a federal building, because my wife is the Deputy Homeland Security Advisor to the United States, if she had walked out of the White House with a single page of any of those things that she walked out with, she would have been arrested and not let out of jail and tried and then given multi-year sentence, right? I mean, she would be gone, and he's running around a free man. His stealing of secrets may be the single greatest security breach in the history of the United States. Fifth, he and his family have taken more money from foreign governments than any Americans in all of our history. And sixth, he ended Roe. Those are things that voters didn't know about him in 2020, that they're going to know about him this time. And I don't think he can survive it. It's too much. I've been doing this a long time. I've worked in presidential elections. I've advised the DCCC in the House. And I don't know how any person could survive it, particularly given his performance on the stump and how reduced and diminished he is as a candidate. So all of this added up is that I'm entering here tonight. Here we are in February now, right? We're nine months away from the election. And I'm really optimistic about what we're going to be able to do. I think the goal, though, and why the work that you're going to do in New York is so important, is we need to not squeak through as we did in 2020, right? We just barely won that election. We need to win this election by 8 to 10 points. We need to make this election a clear repudiation of MAGA so that the dark grip of MAGA can be loosened on the Republican Party. I think we all want to go back to our normal lives, where if we lose an election, we're not worried about our freedoms and our democracy slipping away. The only way that's going to happen is if Republicans view MAGA as a loser and they start walking away from it, which is why this election we have to aspire, we have to have an aspiration of going big, winning by 8 to 10 points, and starting to put MAGA into the dustbin of history where it belongs. I can tell you as a political strategist, someone who looks at data, this is possible. I think this election wants to be a high single-digit victory for us. But we've got to do everything we can to help Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win. And in addition to the work you're going to do in helping us flip the House, everyone should sign up for the Biden-Harris campaign. $10, $15, whatever you can do. Start getting their emails. Start thinking about how you're going to help. Because just like you can do postcarding and texting and phone calling into Tom Suozzi's district, you can do it into the 7 battleground districts too. It's really important. And for me, the most important of those 7, and let's go through them, right? It's Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina, is that I'm really encouraging people to do, if you have a marginal dollar or a marginal call you can make, is to help in North Carolina. That's our expansion state this time. We need to grow, we need to expand the map. We need to make this the biggest possible victory we can. Our democracy is on the line. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you. And thank you for all that you do in your work, because it really makes a big difference. I can tell you that. So thanks, John. Let me take your questions now, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you today.
Thank you for that, Simon. And we have a lot to learn from you. So we definitely want to maximize this question time and get in as many questions as possible. Marlena, I see you have your hand up, so I'm going to go to you first. And then Rodane, you'll be next. So hold on one second.
Hi, good evening, Simon. Marlena Fitzpatrick. I follow you like some biblical prophet. I have you and Christopher Boozy, who everything you say it just happens. So I'm volunteering also for Mi Gente. I did it in 2020. I have been to all of the states, and yeah, during the pandemic, I said I will die of COVID, but this is gonna happen. But there are 2 things outside of everything you mentioned that I am extremely worried about. I come from arts and entertainment and labor. So I've had the privilege of representing from actors, musicians to journalists. And there is one case that could potentially become a big issue. And it is the release of one of my comrades, Evan Gershkovich, who has been detained in Russia.
Yeah.
Talk about a grievance. That started as a grievance that I filed, and now we have two heads of state negotiating. I am terrified that that he will die if Trump wins, because he will not negotiate the release with Russia. The second thing that I'm worried about is Latinos, my people, turning to the other side because of immigration. So what's your take?
Yeah, so let me start with the second one. And, I've been 20 years ago, I helped my organization I ran at the time did the first public bilingual poll of Hispanic voters in the country for Democrats. And then I pioneered the creation of Spanish language advertising for us in 2002 and 2004, even though I don't speak any Spanish and I'm not Hispanic, right? I'm a lot of things. I'm Irish Catholic, German Protestant, Jewish, and a New York mutt like so many other people, right? So I've been involved in this Hispanic work for a long time. And let me just start with this, try to debunk a myth. We're not seeing erosion with Hispanic voters in the Democratic Party. And I think this has been something that has been, I think, improperly manipulated, frankly, by people who have interests. And let me just walk you through the data on this. And all of what the most significant demographic change in America since I was born in the 1960s was the increase of the Hispanic population. In 1965, there were 3 million Hispanics in America, and now there are 55 million, right? This has been a huge change demographically all across the country. And in 2004, when Bush was the last Republican president to win the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, when you look at the Southwest, the heavily Mexican-American parts of the country for a minute, he won Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. They won 5 out of the 8 Senate seats in those 4 states. They won 14 of the 21 House seats in those 4 states. And in 2020, Joe Biden won those 4 states. He was the first Democrat to do so at the presidential level since FDR in 1940. The Republicans now have no senators in those 4 states, and we control 14 of the 23 House seats. Probably what has been the most successful political strategy of the Democratic Party in the last 25 years has been the Democratic Party strategy with Hispanics. California, the state that gave us Nixon and Reagan, is now one of the most democratic states in the country. We've seen a huge bluing of the Southwest. Texas is even, it's a little bit out of reach, but it won't be forever. And in 2004, in 2004, Kerry got 700,000 more votes than Bush did among Hispanics. Biden in 2020 got about 5 million more votes, Hispanic votes, than Kerry, because of the increase in the population and the fact that we've kept our share. We have work to do. This is not a slam dunk. Hispanic community has always been competitive, right? We always have to fight for every vote. But we are doing much better than is perceived. And I think this is important because for a lot of my friends who work in Hispanic politics, I don't want them to feel like they've been a failure or that they're letting us down, because in fact, they've delivered more net votes for us than any other demographic group in the country over the last 20 years. And so our strategy with Hispanics, Latinos has been a resounding success. But as it is a very young electorate, and there's so many new Hispanics and Latinos in the electorate every 2 years, we have to reintroduce ourselves every 2 years to a huge cohort of people. It's a lot of work. We need to spend much more money and time and not take this community for granted, and to make it the very center of our politics. And I think the Democratic Party, it's ebbed and flowed, Marlena, in that regard, right? We've been doing, and so I think we have work to do. The largest poll done of Hispanics this year, in the recent months, was the Univision poll. There was a bipartisan bilingual poll, and it had Biden at his 2020 numbers, right, with no significant erosion. I should say, while we're talking about this, the largest sample youth poll done in recent months, the Harvard IOP poll, or Institute of Politics poll, which is sort of the gold standard 18 to 29-year-old poll, also had Biden holding his 2020 numbers. So one of the things you hear about a lot is that we're bleeding Hispanics, young people, African Americans. The way I like to think about it is that part of our coalition is wandering right now, but it doesn't mean they've gone over to the other side. They have in Florida, right, where there has been real significant change, in a Hispanic community has been in Florida. But it's not happening in the rest of the country in the way that is often described yet, right? But we have to keep competing and working really hard because this is a new part of the electorate that still is not as settled as other parts of the electorate are. On the issue of press freedom and Trump, listen, Trump, he views Putin as an ally of his, right? Putin helped him get elected in 2016. I don't know that Trump would have been president without Putin's help. And the Republicans view, look what they're doing in Ukraine. I mean, the European Union just announced this massive aid package to Ukraine. The president and most of the House and Senate want to do follow along. And there's a minority close, the MAGA fifth columnists, as I call them, who are holding back the aid, embarrassing the United States, emboldening our adversaries, including Iran, which is allied with Russia in this war in Ukraine and also in the Middle East. And I will tell you that what's happening right now with Ukraine and Israel funding, to me, is the most reckless thing Congress has done since World War II. It is emboldening our enemies. It's weakening the United States. It's giving Putin a green light for the genocidal activities that he's conducting in Ukraine. And Rosenberg, by the way, my family Rosenberg came from Ukraine, and many, many years ago, although the Jews in those days fled with everything they could, right? And so we have work to do here. And you're right. I mean, Trump's relationship to authoritarianism and to autocrats around the world is deeply disturbing. The fact that on the stump, he's the one European leader he talks about is Orban, who is the stooge for Putin in the European Union, right? So yes, you have reason to be worried that if Trump were to somehow miraculously become president again, you would never see your friend ever again, in my view. I mean, it would not be something he would trade for in any way. And so thank you for what you do. Thanks for two really good questions. John, who's next?
Rodan, you want to ask yours, and then Andrea, you'll be next.
Thank you, John. And it's Ron Dane, by the way. Good evening, Simon. Like you, I was one of those few people who predicted the 2022 midterms that we were going to see a red wave because of what President Biden did and his accomplishments from the American Rescue Plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've been following your work regarding the Hopium Chronicles, which you are running, and I saw your recent interview on Midas Touch. If you don't know what it is, folks, check it out. It's a great channel, and they're number one on YouTube. So I know that you've been predicting this. And I agree with you 100% that very likely that we're going to win 2024. Trump is a lot weaker than he was in 2016 and 2020. But I think you will agree with me that Trump was always weak. But the main reason why he won in 2016 was because of Putin. It's because of James Comey, and many other factors as well. Because Hillary was well in position to win, and then James Comey brought back up the pointless email investigation. The media ran with it, and then it closed after a couple of days. I think it was like a week or less than a week before the election. And
yes. What's your question? What's your question? Let's get to the question. Yeah.
So my question to you is this: what do you hope will to happen in 2024 in terms of the primary, and how good are our chances against we know our chances with the orange baboon, but how about Nikki Haley? What are our chances? Because I think we have a good chance of defeating Nikki Haley as well.
Yeah, I don't think Nikki Haley is going to get through the primary, right? I think that Trump has got a remarkable lead in South Carolina. This is Trump's party, right? He's strong enough he can't be beaten in the primary, but he's not strong enough to be able to bring his party together after the primary. I mean, part of what happened in 2022 was that these Trumpy candidates that ran in the battleground states were struggled to bring the non-MAGA part of the party along, and you saw a splintering of the Republican Party. You had in many of the battleground states large numbers of prominent Republicans endorsing Democratic candidates, whether it was the governor in Michigan or our Senate candidate in Nevada. I mean, it happened in Arizona. There was a splintering of the Republican Party in 2022. I mean, the line I use on this now is that I think that something really broke inside the Republican Party when Dobbs happened. I think for a big chunk of the Republican Party, 20, 30%, it was just too far. It was too much. It was just too extreme. It was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, and these are things that were long settled. And so since Dobbs, the Republicans have had performance issues. They continue to struggle. I mean, they didn't raise a lot of money in 2022. Their candidates dramatically underperformed throughout the country in every possible kind of race in 2023. There was a blue wave, in essence, in 2023. And you just saw the financial reports today that came out. The RNC had its worst fundraising year in last year since 2013. And if you adjusted for inflation, they had their worst fundraising year since 1993. They're basically broke and out of money. The Senate candidates in the battlegrounds are not raising money on the Republican side. Trump spent more money last year than he raised, which I will tell you, let's just talk about this for a second. It's catastrophic for them. His burn rate, in part because he spent $50 million on legal bills that we know about, right? That came out of his campaign committees. You're a candidate, spending more money than you take in the year before the election. I mean, I don't know that that's ever happened before in modern American history. There's all sorts of warning signs about their continued struggle and underperformance. There are Republican Party organizations in these battleground states where all the leaders have been indicted, for trying to lead an insurrection against America, and the parties are falling apart. The Republican Party is an historic mess right now. And the reason I say this and I push this so hard, it's not to make us complacent. It's not to feel confident. It's that I think that we've all been spooked. There's this sense that Trump has these magical superpowers and that he's some kind of magician, political magician. And that, as you mentioned, what happened, and that all came from his miraculous victory in 2016. And let's set the record straight on this. Vladimir Putin made a dramatic and substantial intervention in the election in 2016. And so did the FBI. 10 days before the election in 2016, Hillary Clinton was cruising. She was up by 5 or 6 points. The race wasn't moving. He had performed terribly in the 3 debates. It was embarrassing how he had done. The election was functionally over 10 days before the election. And then Comey dropped his bomb on the election. And then Hillary lost by a few thousand votes, right? I mean, 70,000 votes in 3 states. No way Trump would have won without both of those dramatic and historic interventions. He never had magical powers. He never had some deep connection to the working class of the United States. If he did, why did we blow it out and win Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by 20 points in 2018, the next election right after his election in 2016? So there is this kind of lingering thing about strongman, as Ruth Ben-Ghiat calls, sense about Trump. And I think it's why we have to keep talking about how weak he is, not strong, how divided they are, not united they are. The way to take down a strong man is by talking about their weakness. The emperor has no clothes, the Wizard of Oz, the curtains being drawn back, right? Whatever it is, whatever these words and analogies and ways that we have describing this guy's the most full of shit guy in the history of American politics. And we have to stop giving him power that he doesn't have. Dr. Timothy Snyder, who to me has been one of my most important teachers through this period, who's a Yale professor who's written a lot about fascism, talks about in his book on tyranny, which I would strongly recommend to everybody. In the very first chapter, his first chapter is called Do Not Obey in Advance. And when he talks about how, as in a totalitarian, authoritarian country, people are trained for survival to obey the leader in advance, to self-censor, to take action in advance. And part of what I'm trying to do through my Hopium Chronicles and being in gatherings like this is to give you permission to withdraw yourself from this right-wing narrative that pollutes our discourse every day and reestablish fundamental truths. I talk about how my most important work that I think I'm doing now is to give Americans permission to love their country again. And so there is so much we can do together to extricate ourselves from this right-wing noise machine and the false stories they're telling about us and this wonderful, remarkable country that we're part of, this great party that we're part of, the strong leader that Joe Biden has been for all of us. We have to live in a place of optimism and hope and strength and power and not give our power over to them. And that's why I think I'm spending a lot of time right now in my national commentary, really trying to remind everybody, as I say, my line about this, which all of you are welcome to steal, is that, you can dye his hair, paint his face, strap a girdle on him and a diaper too, pump him full of speed, and he's still not going to look like a presidential candidate ever again. And so we cannot give him power that he doesn't have. I think the media, by the way, saw him up close in Iowa, New Hampshire, and many of the traditional people that cover American politics were shocked at how diminished and degraded and wild he was. And so you're seeing a change in the coverage of him. I mean, his armor has been pierced. And it's why I think you're seeing kind of a vibe shift in the new language that people are using. It's not only that the economy is doing really well and, Biden met his promises, is that this guy is just, the most unfit person to ever run in our history. And shame on the Republican Party for rallying behind this guy.
Well said there. Andrea, we're going to you. And then after that, we're going to do Stephen and Daniel.
Okay, first, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
I'm actually all in on Biden and have been rooting for Trump in the primary because I think he's so beatable.
Yep.
So I'm all in line with that. So I'm not sure about my question, but my concern is third-party candidates.
Yeah.
Or if something happens to Trump and there's a different Republican up there, because I think we're more vulnerable in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a real possibility. I've often talked about how, since 2020, the Republicans have done two things that could keep a party out of power for a decade or even a generation. One was Roe, ending Roe, right, was stripping the rights and freedoms away of more than half the population. And then not only doing that, but passing these barbaric abortion restrictions all across the country. It is the kind of thing that should keep them out of power for a long time, regardless of who their candidate is, right? And then the second thing is the insurrection and the attempt to end American democracy, and the fact that they're now rallying behind a guy whose basic campaign slogan is, hey, I tried to end American democracy last time and failed, but if you elect me, I'm going to finish the job this time. I don't know how the party of Lincoln and Reagan ever becomes anything other than the party of insurrection. And I don't know that they're going to be able to get out of all this, regardless of who their candidate is. I think these are enormous anchors on their, for the New Yorkers here, right? I mean, we're all steeped in FDR and the history of the New Deal and so on. I mean, we controlled the Congress after 1932 for 62 years, right? I mean, if you think about that, right, where there was 1-2 year period in the 50s where we lost control of Congress, the Congress was controlled by the Democratic Party for 62 years because of the failure of the Republican Party in the 1930s and the Great Depression. Is this what Trump has done and what they've done on abortion and stripping rights away from Americans equal to what the Republicans did in the Great Depression? You could make the argument it's far worse, right? And so I think that we have to understand that the reason we have to prosecute this indictment of them with such aggression, and so because the American people, your colleagues, your fellow citizens, deserve to know the truth about what's happened to the Republican Party. And it's uncomfortable. I mean, the first time that I talked about Donald Trump raping a woman, I was really deeply uncomfortable in front of other people. But I have an obligation to tell all of you the truth. That's my job, right? That's staying connected to truth and the fact there is an independent, that truth exists, that there's an objective reality, that not everything can be filtered through the horse shit at Fox News, right? And this Republican organization masquerading as a news organization, right? We have to, sticking to truth is one of the most important things we as proud patriots can do right now. And so we shouldn't sugarcoat what they become to our friends. We need to be brutal about it because they've become so dangerous. They've betrayed the country. They've betrayed everything that we've ever fought for as America throughout all of our history. And so the threat is real. And he's articulated it. I mean, there's no dancing around this. I mean, American democracy will end if he wins the election, period. He's already told us, right? It's not me saying it. So I think that we have to be able to live in that, but also not get overwhelmed by it. And it's why what I talk about at Hopium is that what we all need to do is to do more and worry less, is the phrase that I use. Because I know that I'm working 7 days a week. I'm doing groups like this 2 to 3 nights a week. I am working harder than I've worked. I'm not a young guy anymore, but I'm working harder than I've worked in a very long time because it's the only way I can stay sane in all this, right? Is by getting up every day and doing everything I can to know that I can look at my kids in the eye and tell them that I did everything I could in a time when the country was under incredible threat. And I want to just say one thing as Democrats and as New York Democrats, FDR Democrats. And another thing that I hope will motivate you because it motivates me. In 1941, FDR gave probably the most important speech ever given in American English, which was the Four Freedoms speech, where he laid out that he wanted the world to be based on top of freedom and not authoritarianism and dominion, that he had a vision for a world after World War II that would reject authoritarianism and build a new system that was really essentially an extension of the way that we operate here in the United States and export it to the rest of the world. And those four freedoms became the basis of the UN chart. It became the basis of the Atlantic Charter in between Churchill and FDR, which became the foundation of the alliance that won the war. Those four freedoms then became baked into the United Nations Charter in 1945. Those four freedoms then became the foundation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 that Eleanor Roosevelt helped negotiate. And those four freedoms and the concept of freedom became the foundation on top of which the entire world was built after World War II. And that world that FDR imagined around those four freedoms has created a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive in the world than it's been since FDR's Four Freedoms speech. More people have more economic opportunity and political freedom than they've ever had. More people have lived under democracy than ever before. The poverty rate, the extreme poverty rate has plummeted despite the global population exploding. This has been a golden age to be alive. There's never been a time where people had more opportunity to live their dream than during this period. And we did that. The Democratic Party did that. We are the most consequential political force in all of human history. No organized group of people have ever done more for more people than we have as Democrats. And that world that FDR imagined and that we helped build together and maintain is now being challenged as it was in the 1940s, right? Our party was called to ensure that freedom and democracy prevailed here and everywhere. And we're being called again. I mean, I think we understand the stakes here. It's not just here, it's everywhere. If American democracy falls, then democracy falls everywhere. And so the consequences of this is immense. And I just want to say that part of the reason I work so hard is that I feel lucky to be part of the most consequential political project in human history, the one that's done more good for more people. And I'm going to fight like hell to make sure that it's there for my kids and my grandkids. And I think that's why we're all here tonight.
That was fantastic. And thank you for that, because we need people to get revved up and then take that to the doors and the phones and the postcards. Just a second point, because Andrea brought up, and that's good. With the third party thing, what do you
sorry.
there?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Andrea, I got taken away. Thank you for all this. Listen, I think we have to do more, worry less about it. I mean, there's the only way we can really strategically respond is by building up Joe Biden and the Democrats, right? If we win this election by 8 to 10 points, the third party stuff's not going to matter. I think there is going to come a point soon where we're going to have to start degrading the, Kennedy and Stein and Cornel West and whoever might else emerge. I don't know how serious candidates any of them are going to be. I also don't know that there are going to be debates this time, which is usually how third party candidates kind of get a little bit of a lift, because I don't think there will be. I don't think Trump's going to debate. Certainly, if he's the nominee, based on his performance in recent weeks, I think it would be insane for them to allow him to be on national television. And so I'm not really worried about them right now. I'm more worried about us building up Biden. That's the response to all of this. And the second thing is, let's just be honest, right? Jill Stein, Cornel West, and Robert Kennedy, they're horrible candidates, right? I'm not scared of them. I mean, there could have been a charismatic third-party candidate that could have worried all of us. It ain't them. And so I don't want, again, like I said earlier about not obeying in advance, I don't want to give them power that they haven't earned themselves. Let them, if they want to be competitive and make it, let them go do it, right? Let them go fight it out and become competitive. I don't know that's going to happen. And then finally, I'll just say that that's it. I mean, I could go on, but I just want to answer. I'm not, the other thing about this, it raises this basic idea that I have, which is that we need to spend 2/3 of our time talking about us and building ourselves up and less time talking about them. Because I think we have a lot of their arguments about us live in our head. And we've been, live rent free in our head, as kids say today, right? And what we don't do a great job at is talking about, the goodness and greatness of the country, and Joe Biden's been a good president, and talk about the 3 major investment bills. We need to spend more time, putting positive sentiment into the discourse in order to respond to the negative sentiment that they're putting into the discourse every day. And so part of what we do at Hopium is I really try to help people learn about the good things we've done, to be able to share them through your networks, and to be information warriors for your president, your party, and your country, and to make sure that we're flooding our networks with good information, because we know the Republicans are really good at spreading, putting not so good information into our discourse every day. So that also applies to third party. I mean, I think that we spend too much time, I think, worrying about things as opposed to extolling the virtues of the things that we've done. And we have to get a better balance in that regard, I think.
Great. And then, Stephen, we're going to go right to you for your question. Hold on, I'm going to unmute you right now. And then up is Daniel, and then we have, you will go to Daniel first, and then we have Michael Morrison.
Thank you very much. I'm Stephen Reel from Northwest Bronx Indivisible. And my question, Simon, first of all, thank you so much for what you do. Reading your column and reading your tweets give me the strength to carry on every day. It really makes a difference to me. So you're doing a great job with that. Thank you. What do you think a post-Trump Republican Party looks like? I mean, you've alluded to that, because I think one of the reasons Trump has been so successful is he's tapped in to a very real extremist, anxious public that loves what he's talking about, loves what he says, loves what he claims he's going to do. And that's not, Trump may go away if we kick his butt this November, but the rank and file Republicans aren't going away. And I wonder how you see.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually, and I actually haven't been asked that in recent months. And I'll give you I've been giving you long answers, so let me give you some quick ones so we can get to the questions. Is that, first of all, I don't think we know. I mean, but we know from history that extremists can overtake a party, and the process of unraveling that can be very difficult and hard. And because of our system where we only have 2 political parties in America, by the way, by statute and by law, there's only 2 parties. It's deeply consequential in this country that one of our 2 parties has gone crazy and been overtaken by extremism and extremists. Because in most other democracies, in parliamentary democracies, you could just go start another party. And you can't really do that in the US. And we can talk about why. It's not worth getting into why. It's just a fact, right? And so we have to, it's going to be critical that Nikki Haley and Liz Cheney and the non-MAGA Republicans are going to wage some kind of titanic war after Trump and MAGA lose this time. I think it's starting with the RNC chair, and there will be an enormous battle over the future of the party. And my own view is that, the MAGA core, and you saw this with immigration. I've worked on immigration for a long time. It was always about 30% of the party, of the Republican Party, and about 15% of the electorate we're heavily motivated by immigration and the racial transformation of the country, right? I mean, when I was born in New York in the 1960s, the country was 90% white and 10% black, and basically a handful of little other, groups like Hispanics. And today it's 65% white and 35% people of color, and it's going to be a majority minority country soon. And this sense of demographic transformation that's happened is actually, in the sense of the lost, the great replacement theory, is really a powerful thing, but only for about 30% of the Republican Party. I mean, we know this from data going back a long time. And then I think, 30% of the Republican Party is not with MAGA, and then there's a bunch that's in between that's going to be contested and fought for. I do think that, so I don't think that this is the dominant faith. I don't think MAGA is the dominant faith of the Republican Party or preordained to be it forever. But we're going to find out, right? But I don't want it. This is why, by the way, this immigration and border debate is actually so consequential, because this is sort of the core of the energy. I mean, when Trump came down the escalator at Trump Tower, what was the first thing he talked about? He talked about Mexican rapists and the invasion and all this. I mean, this is the core of his narrative, right? Which is that, the days of the white supremacy are coming to an end and we're going to fight. And, it's kind of incredible that we're actually even having this conversation for a New Yorker to be doing it, of all people, by the way, given our amazing city and all that it has represented for so long as the great melting pot that it is, right? And so I'm optimistic that there is a path forward for the Republican Party to become a center-right party. The question of whether or not the United States needs to have more than two parties is going to be, I think, also part of this conversation, because Liz Cheney said something really interesting the other day, which she said, I don't think we can ever fix the Republican Party after this. We may need a new party. I don't think she understands that she can't really create one. And so, or it would require an act of Congress potentially to even allow it. So we're in this like bizarre place. I mean, if we were in any other parliamentary system, the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party would have split off. They would be in our coalition. She'd be in the cabinet. We'd be at 60% in the polls, 55% in the polls. And Trump would be the head of this right-wing kind of small party. But we don't have that. And it's been a hijacking of one of the two American political parties. So I'm optimistic that over time, the good people, the good Republicans can prevail. But man, it's going to be rough going for a long time. To your point, Stephen, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, but I'm a little bit more of an optimist about this, because I don't think it's as big a part of the Republican Party as it feels right now. Look, he only got 50% of the vote in Iowa and New Hampshire. 30% of Republicans have said that if he commits a felony, that they're not going to vote for him. That's already happened. I mean, he's already committed felonies and these things are, so he's in danger. And I think the thing is that he's in charge of the party now, but he's not strong enough to bring along the non-MAGA part with him, which is why, in my view, the Republican Party sort of splintered into two groups right now. And it's important on the third party point. The most important rogue party, third party movement in America is with us, right? The never Trump or never MAGAs. I mean, imagine if Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney campaign with Joe Biden, what that's going to mean, right? It will be unprecedented in our history to have seen that kind of crossover. And I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to be devastating for Trump when that happens, because it's going to give permission structure for that 30% to leave and cross over and be with us temporarily, right? Not forever, but temporarily, which is what we need. But great question. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah. Next up, we have Daniel, and then we have Michael Morrison.
Can we do one thing, John? Can we take both questions back to back, and then I'll answer both and then just wrap?
Absolutely.
Is that good? Okay.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay. Daniel first. I just asked to unmute you, and then Michael will do you as well.
So thank you for your work, first of all. Simon, my question has to do with tactics and what you think would be an efficient use of the resources of a kind of a grassroots organization like us in this struggle, both on the national level but also thinking about the the congressional districts that we need to flip in New York State.
Okay, and then Michael?
I had one point to mention. First of all, Simon, terrific for you to be here. Thanks for all your clarity, a lot of clarity to, and as well as your conviction is tremendous inspiration. So thank you. I wanted to mention to you that the Indivisible National Group has a subgroup called the Truth Brigade.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to look into, see
Yep.
where they are now, because I'm really on board with the whole, finding the vectors to emphasize truth. But I wanted to ask you what you felt was the best way to keep contact with your thinking. I heard about the Midas touch. I think
Yeah.
Rondane mentioned that. That
Yeah.
seemed to be a good. But anything you could say to how to keep in touch with you?
Sure. So I have a newsletter and a website called Hopium Chronicles, and in our world, the term hopium was used as a slur against me in 2022 by Nate Silver and by others who claimed that I was smoking hopium, and when I was telling everybody that Democrats were going to do well in the election, and I decided to take this concept of hopium and use it as my grounding sentiment. And in our community, what hopium means is that it's hope with a plan. We just don't want the election to go well. We actually go to work to make it so, right? So it's
Nice.
and because hope is sort of a little bit of a passive concept, right? And hopium is more, in my view, active.
Right.
So on the question of the Truth Brigade and all this, and also Daniel's question, look, the way to think about what you're doing, and I speak to groups like this all over the country because there has been, as Heather Cox Richardson calls it, a great awakening in America. There are millions of you all around the country who are on Zooms like this regularly, who make phone calls and write postcards and text and who give money and who canvass and are information warriors spreading good stuff through their networks. I didn't really understand personally, as somebody who's been in this business and living in Washington for a long time, I didn't really understand what had happened. And a lot of this was accelerated during COVID, right? Was that the remote texting and phone calling technology, which allows you to call into any district in the country, no matter where you live. This stuff is pretty new, right? It just developed. And, the postcarding revolution, which I, have learned a lot about. I'm now like on board. I'm an advocate for postcarding, and we can talk about it. But it used to be that you could only export your money out into swing areas, but now you can export your labor. And what's important is that it's not just you in this group. It's, you're connected to Indivisible. I work with the National Indivisible. There's millions of you who are doing this. And so you're in a very loud chorus. You may be only one voice in a chorus, but the chorus is millions of you. And those millions of people are what's driving these amazing election outcomes in our recent performance. I mean, one of the things that just blew my mind and sort of, made me a convert to this new bottom-up grassroots revolution that's happening in the Democratic Party is what happened in the early vote in 2022. I mean, we did better in the early vote in all the battleground states than we did in 2020 in an election where we did much worse. And what that showed was the power of what you all are doing. Because what's happening is, as somebody who's been doing this for more than 30 years, the money that we're out raising Republicans all the time now. Sometimes in 2022, our House and Senate candidates outraised their Republican counterparts by 4 to 5 to 1. That's never happened before in the history of modern democratic politics. And that money is allowing the campaigns to not just control the information environment and to sort of push off in the right-wing noise machine, but it's allowing them to build unprecedentedly large field operations and grassroots operations for the volunteers who do the traditional door knocking and canvassing, but it also allows them to import labor from other places, New York, California, places where there aren't swing races. And so that these large campaigns have then created more muscle for us than we've ever had. And where it showed up was in the early vote. We could see it in the early vote. We drove the early vote in a way that we had never done before as a party, because we've always been kind of an election day party, right? Now we're an early vote Party, which is a much better thing. I've got a piece coming out on it on Saturday. I'm going to be writing about this concept of voting on day one and how it's kind of a revolution in the way that we run campaigns. But the point is that the work that you do, it all matters because you're doing it with all of these other people all around the country. And it's why we keep performing at the upper end of what's possible. It's why I'm spending so much time speaking to groups like this. I mean, I've since the summer of 2022, I've probably given 150 presentations like this easily. Maybe my wife and my kids are sick of it, right? But it's what we need to do because I believe in all of you. I believe in the power of what you're doing. I've seen it with my own eyes, right? So what you're doing really matters. We are together saving our democracy. We're not waiting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We're not waiting for Jamie Harrison. We're not waiting for Jay Jacobs in New York. We're just doing the work. We're rolling up our sleeves and doing the work because the technology and the systems that have been built allow you to do this on your own. You don't need to go run down to the party headquarters the way we all used to do these things, in the old days. And what it's done is that it's opened up the door. These kind of Zooms and this kind of action has allowed hundreds of thousands or millions of more people to be more meaningfully involved in their democracy in a way that is going to, when we get to the other side of this Trump era, we're going to have the strongest, most robust democracy that we've had in generations, potentially, because of all this work and the fight that all of you have. And so I just want to say that it's, believe, if Ted Lasso, I need to start using the Ted Lasso stuff. We have to believe that this work is what is the key. To me, it didn't matter who the Democratic nominee was going to be in 2024. We keep winning all these elections, regardless of who the candidate is, right? Because they suck and we're really good. And there's this basic frame in American politics. The American people understand that something has gone deeply wrong with the Republican Party, and they're voting on it. And so let me just conclude these 2 points. One is Hopium Chronicles, my site, is free. I'm keeping it free. 95% of the content on the site is free because I want it to help give you more muscles and make you more effective at what you do. For decades, I used to advise the White House and senators and congressmen. I ran sort of a private think tank for the Democratic Party. I shut that down a year ago, and now I'm doing all this because I believe in the power of what you all are doing. And I also want to honor the fear and worry that everybody has about their country because they want to be more effective. Daniel, your question was great. So first of all, at Hopium, the site, we talk about this all the time. This is what we do. We're people who do things, right? We change the future. We have hopium, right? We have hope with a plan. But then finally, I just want to say is that to me, is of all the years I've been in this business, and I was part of the Clinton War Room, and I've done remarkable things in my political career, this work that I'm doing with all of you is the most important work I've ever done. This is the most important thing because you're becoming proud patriots who love your country. You're expressing this love of country in this powerful way through postcarding and texting and phone calling and giving a little bit of money here and there. And let me just tell you what we did together at the Hopium site, right? We played a major role in raising money and directing volunteers to Wisconsin. We played a major role in flipping the Jacksonville mayor's race in the spring of 2023. We pushed people to Ohio in order to help win there. We played a huge role in flipping the state house in Virginia. And not only did we damage Youngkin in Virginia, but Virginia just elected their first African-American speaker in its history in the heart of the Confederacy, in the capital of the Confederacy, such an extraordinarily symbolic thing. And my community, all of us, we all did that. Our candidates in Virginia outraised in every House and Senate race. We outraised the Republicans in every single race, despite all of Youngkin's money and being popular, right? This grassroots revolution that you're part of is preserving freedom and democracy for all of us here in America and all around the world. This is incredibly important work. And I'm so grateful that all of you are taking the time out of your busy lives to be here with me tonight and to continue fighting for this country because it deserves it. We are the most important country in the history of the world. Our vision for humanity based on freedom has created this golden age, and this is worth fighting for, everybody. So thank you for what you do. John, thank you for reaching out. Sending love back to my homeland in the Bronx, right, from my mom. And And just let's stay in touch and good luck, everybody. But listen,
Do you-
we got to go win New York 3. That's the thing
Yes.
right now, right? Tom Swazi, I've raised a ton of money for him. You can see a video of me interviewing him on the Hopium site. He came and joined us a few weeks ago. Job one right now, New York 3. That's what
Tom
we gotta do.
Swazi.
Tom
Absolutely.
Swazi.
Simon, do you have time for
Yeah.
just one more question?
Go really quick because I got to go eat
Okay.
dinner.
No worries. No worries. We don't want to
Yeah.
keep you too long.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
question is, with respect to the media and particularly Fox News, and we have the New York
Yeah.
Post here, which is basically the
Yeah.
Funhouse Mirror as well, Murdoch
Yeah.
owned. And, they did a lot of stuff. They did a number with bail reform. They do a number with the migrants to get everybody all stirred up. And as you pointed out, Joe Biden is a fundamentally decent man. And I can only imagine that the reason that, his approval ratings in the 40s is because these right-wing elements are doing a number on him in a way that what is something, obviously he's the most accomplished legislative president since LBJ. We can go through the legislation, but what can we tell those low information voters to try to make them have a second coming around on Joe Biden? Because, he is a very decent human being and someone we all agree.
And he's been a good president. He's been a good president, and the country's better off. Just keep saying that, right? Whenever you get blown, when I get up in the morning and I have to ground myself, I have my little mantra now, right? Which is Joe Biden is a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party's strong and winning elections all across the country. And they have Trump, and then you can do whatever you want with the they part, right? But let me just end with this, which is that part of the reason I went to Substack instead of running a C3, C4 organization is that, I started my career in New York after college as a TV producer and writer. I worked for ABC News and eventually for a woman named Linda Ellerby, who some of you may remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so I produced and wrote television shows and as a young guy, and I grew up in the TV news business, and I went over to politics because I wanted to, be the animal in the zoo and not the person looking at the animal in the zoo, right? And so I grew up in this business, and I know the business, and I've, been my specialty, even though I do all stuff in politics, has been around comms and messaging and arguments and narrative. And, we're in the midst of a pretty major information revolution in the United States right now. And the old media, as you know from watching all these layoffs, is collapsing. The independent media in America is collapsing. And so I think we have to have two responses to that, right? One, and I call it closing the loudness gap. They're much louder than we are. They invested not in buying television ads and renting media, but they owned media, right?
Yeah.
They built Fox News. They have all these other outlets. And so how do we close the gap with them? I think two ways. One is I talk about how we have to reinvent the war room. And I was in the war room 32 years ago, hard to believe, got screamed at by Carville every day as a young guy. And we need to think of the war room now, not as 20 sweaty kids drinking Red Bulls and producing TikTok videos, but as 2 to 3 million proud patriots who are networked into the Biden campaign and amplifying his good works through our own networks. I call it being an information warrior for democracy. Think of a victory garden in World War II, right? You have the ability through your networks, as you pointed out, John, whether it's at the coffee machine in your office, or whether it's through a book club that you have, or however you communicate to the world, you need to take our story, our narrative, and share it through your networks. Think about this. Tucker Carlson in his heyday reached 3 million people, the most influential guy in American politics. Imagine if 2 to 3 million Democrats reach 10 people each every day. That's 20, 30 million people. That makes us very loud. We have much more agency here than we understand. A lot of our family has taken loudness and put it into campaigns, right? Postcards, texting, phone calls. We need to do this other thing. We have to develop this other muscle because they're operating 24/7, 365 in trying to shape the information environment, create this false red wave, for example, or the fact that we were in recession when we weren't in recession, or that Trump is strong when he's actually really weak, right? They are pumping every day, and we have to have. The second thing is that we also have to start owning our own media. And if you come to the Hopium site, you'll start to learn other organizations that I support and I collaborate with, the Midas Touch, Courier Newsroom, Resolute Square, Deep State Radio. There is a series of new innovative organizations that I think are doing remarkable work, through podcasts and through videos and through everything. Midas Touch now, as one of, I'm not seeing his first name here. I don't know if he's still here. Yeah, Rondane said earlier, Midas Touch now is which we own. It's 3 guys, right? By the way, from
Yeah.
nearby in Long Island, right nearby. They reach more people on the internet every day than Fox News does. And it's 3 guys in LA as Democrats. And I just went on them this week and they asked me to come back on next week. We are starting to get smarter, but we're not going to be able to close the gap with them in this year. And so what we need to do is we need to do all 3 things: invent our own media, innovate, which I'm trying to do through the Substack platform myself. Second is that we need to be information warriors for our democracy and take seriously the notion of spreading this good information through our networks. And then third is that we have to do the traditional work in campaigns where we traditionally are very loud, and we've been louder than they are. We've been able to make up some of that loudness gap. And I'll just end by saying that on my site, if you're a paid member, you get to be part, it's $45 a year. You get to be part of a chat that's an ongoing chat. And I think the proudest moment I've had since I started this community 11 months ago was when a woman named Irene, and I don't know where Irene's from, she didn't say, said that, Simon, I went out to dinner with 3 of my good friends the other night, and they all started dumping on Biden. They're all Democrats. And I used the information you gave me, and I argued with them at dinner. And by the end of the dinner, they'd all come around and they were supporting and excited about Biden. Imagine if 1 million people do that every day. The power of that. It's incredible. And so every time that you speak to somebody, recognize that you're taking a political action and that you're putting, whether it's the idea in your head is whatever the image in your head is, whether it's you're putting a little stone in a pond and the rivulet's going out, however you imagine this, right? We have to build a very loud chorus, and where we've been really exceptional is doing it in campaigns, but we have to develop this additional muscle now, and it's urgent because our candidate this time is not going to be as loud as Obama and Clinton was in their campaigns. And so there's more of a responsibility for us to fill in the gap and to help Joe Biden in this regard. And so, John, I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Thank you, Simon.
Grateful
You
for
were a
all
great guest.
Yeah, listen, thanks everybody for what you're doing. I'm really proud to be part of in this fight with all of you. But the only deal is, right now that I'm here, we have to win New York 3. And you have to go win as many of these seats in New York as you possibly can, flip the house and make this crazy guy, Mike Johnson, give him something else to do with his life, right? Let's make Hakeem, listen, Hakeem, I know Hakeem's from Brooklyn, but he's still going to be a good leader of the Democratic Party next year. So thanks everybody. Take care. And,
right.
Good luck and keep fighting. Take care.
Everybody. Now let's take what Simon just said. We're going to be emailing out to you all. New York 3, it's critical. We need everyone on the phones. The 2 people who have their hands raised, email me the questions. I'll get them to Simon. I just want to thank, I already said a few names. I want to thank Paige Delano. I want to thank Phyllis Holloway, Nancy Friedman, Bruce Bergeson, and Barbara Gold. They're all on our steering committee. So I apologize I didn't get to you in the beginning. There was a lot coming at me at once, but we appreciate all of you, all that you do. And again, New York 3, everyone's going to get an email. So have a nice night. We'll all talk soon.